Chancellor, as public orator, may I, Nigel Seasage, present Bryan Williams, a candidate for an honorary degree. When Bryan Williams told the careers teacher at his Merseyside grammar school that he wanted to be a doctor, she said, "Be more realistic, Bryan. Why not a hospital technician?" But Bryan was not easily discouraged, then or since. Bryan certainly came from a disadvantaged background, in the economic sense at least. His father was a dock labourer, and his childhood was defined by poverty. The oldest of 6 boys, he held 2 jobs while at school, delivering bread in the morning and stacking supermarket shelves at weekends. He had free school meals, a particularly humiliating experience then, as the recipients were separated at meal breaks. Fortunately, he learned to fight his own corner, literally as a boxer, and he was particularly gifted at football, good enough to take part in competitions nationwide. His early ambition was to play professionally, but he was increasingly drawn to science. He suggests that frequent visits to hospitals with sports injuries stimulated his interest in medicine, but a far more powerful influence was the tragic early death of his father from a brain hemorrhage when Bryan was 16. His dad had insisted that education was the only way to escape poverty, so Bryan ignored that careers teacher, applied successfully to read medicine at St Mary's in London, and graduated in 1983 with a top award. Bryan found London exhilarating, and he stayed at St Mary's for his initial postgraduate positions. But for senior house officer and registrar training, he decided to move, and chose Leicester. He knew nothing about the city, and not much more about the relatively young medical school, except that it was a good place for training, and that it was rapidly gaining an outstanding reputation for cardiovascular research. As a house officer, he was initially in the team of Kent Woods, who, by a happy coincidence, will receive an honorary degree here this afternoon. Bryan warmly acknowledges the influence of leading members of the school at that time, such as John Swales, the founding professor of medicine, who made an immense contribution to the study and treatment of hypertension, a great communicator whose door was always open, and Peter Bell, the founding professor of surgery, whose honest and direct advice Bryan greatly appreciated. Also important to his development was a 2-year visiting fellowship at the Colorado Laboratory of the distinguished American nephrologist Bob Schreier. Bryan returned from the USA in 1991 to a British Heart Foundation fellowship at Leicester, beginning his long and productive association with Britain's leading heart research charity. In 1996, at the tender age of 39, Bryan was appointed Professor of Medicine and Head of the Division of Medicine at Leicester. His growing clinical research reputation at this time is illustrated by the award of the Lineker Medal by the Royal College of Physicians in 1995, the Merck International Research Prize in 2001, and presidency of the British Society of Hypertension from 2001 to 2003. Research commitments did not divert Bryan from the other aspects of clinical leadership, as it sometimes does. He remained active as a consultant, he still is, and he devoted much time and effort to improving the medical assessment of acute emergency admissions. The patient safety work on behalf of the Royal College of Physicians later drove the development of the National Early Warning System, which brings consistency to assessing the severity of a patient's illness, prompting timely critical care intervention. In 2012, while keeping his family home in Leicestershire, he left here for University College London and its associated NHS Trust. Among many leadership roles, Bryan directed the National Institution of Health and Care Research Biomedical Research Centre for 10 years, overseeing exceptionally complex clinical trials programs across a wide variety of disciplines, including infectious diseases, cancer, cardiovascular and neurological diseases, in the process changing clinical practice worldwide. Later examples of public recognition include chairmanship of the European Council of Hypertension, presidency of the International Society of Hypertension, fellowship of the Academy of Medical Sciences, the Mackenzie Medical of the UK Cardiovascular Society, and in 2024, the OBE. Or measured another way, Bryan has some 600 papers to his credit, has been cited over 150,000 times, and has been the principal or co-principal investigator for over £300 million worth of research funding. In 2023, these outstanding credentials led to his appointment as Chief Scientific and Medical Officer at the British Heart Foundation, where he is responsible for the vision, strategy, and activities which deliver the charity's mission. The BHF's research portfolio, for which Bryan is responsible, currently includes projects worth nearly £450 million. If pressed, Bryan will say that he is quietly proud of making a contribution to the effective control of high blood pressure. This from the man who has been independently recognized as having identified the best drug treatment for resistant hypertension, which affects about 100 million people around the world. Bryan has never forgotten his origins while rising to his current high positions. He bears no grievance about his early disadvantages, but feels strongly about the need to recognize ability and provide opportunity. For several years, he was a trustee of InterScience UK, a charity which aims to unlock the potential of young people from low socioeconomic backgrounds and boost inclusion in science, technology, engineering, and maths. In this, the 50th anniversary year of the medical school, we are proud to recognize Bryan's determination in overcoming early challenges, his many contributions to this university, and the outstanding and continuing impact of his work on the understanding and treatment of cardiovascular disease, still the leading cause of death worldwide. Chancellor, on the recommendation of the Senate and the Council, I present Bryan Williams that you may confer on him the honorary degree of Doctor of Science.
Chancellor, Vice-Chancellor, and senior colleagues of the university, thank you very much for this very special honour, because I'm returning to a place where I spent a quarter of a century of my career, from a junior doctor right through to becoming Professor of Medicine here, and it laid the foundation for everything that has happened since. So I know some of you are not medical graduates today, but pretty much everything you're involved in is medical science, and I wanted just to take the opportunity to say a few words. Firstly, to congratulate you all. You sit there proud, and you should be proud of what you've achieved. You've made it after many years of late nights, hopefully working, early mornings, and frankly, an alarming number of flashcards. You're now officially a doctor. Take a moment to look around the people alongside you. These are the people who in the future will call you at 2 in.the morning with a clinical question. And you will learn how to pretend not to mind. Take a moment also to recognize the support of your family. This is a special time. They and many others have helped you get here. That meant a lot to me, the advice that I got in my early life. This is a moment for them too, and they are immensely proud of you. And as I saw some of you, and I'll see more of you coming up those steps, I note I'm taking an increasing interest in the graduates in medicine as I get older, and I encourage you all to work hard and get up to speed quickly. Now, let me tell you something about a case that I think exemplifies the career that many of you will go into and what a doctor really is. The patient is Mr. Sharma, who was 67. Typically, he came in not because he felt unwell, but because his wife made him come. He'd been short of breath, climbing stairs. He'd been waking up at night, and in his words, was a bit off. As he sat in the chair, arms crossed, mildly offended by having to be there, the junior doctor who saw him that morning did something unremarkable. She sat down. She didn't type. She didn't glance at the screen. She just looked at him and said, "Tell me what's happening." The statement took just 4 minutes, and in those 4 minutes, she heard everything she needed to know. Not just the heart failure, the 3-pillow orthopnea, but a man who was frightened, who had a daughter who was getting married in 6 weeks and desperately didn't want to let anybody down. She treated the disease, but she also treated him. And that is what you, as doctors, are being asked to do. Not one or the other, but always both. Now, William Osler, who you'll hear quoted at you quite a lot, said that medicine is a science of uncertainty and an art of probability. What he meant is that what you've learned so far, the textbooks will take you to the door. What happens next beyond that door, inside that room, is yours. And inside that room, you will face things no exam has ever prepared you for. You will deliver news that can change a life in a sentence. You will sit with families where the silences are too long. You will occasionally, hopefully occasionally, be wrong. And you'll have to live with that. And you learn to live with it and go back the next morning. This is not a warning, it's an invitation to you all, because doctors who last, doctors who thrive, are not the ones who do not feel the weight of it at times. They're the ones who feel the weight of it and show up anyway. There is a weight to the white coat, or nowadays scrubs. The relationship between a doctor and a patient is completely sacrosanct, perhaps the most privileged of all, for them and for you. Medicine, it struck me, as the only profession where a complete stranger you've never met will come in and start telling you things that they have told nobody else before. Not their spouse, not their children, not their closest friends or confidants. It's a really special relationship, and it's a privilege that is earned every day, not just at graduation. That interaction is critical. Francis Peabody said, written nearly a year ago, and I keep coming back to this, the secret of care of the patient is in caring for the patient. Simple, almost too simple. Yet every bad outcome that I've ever witnessed in medicine can be traced somewhere to that moment of truth. Don't forget it. So here is what I ask of you today as I finish. Not just as doctors, but as the particular doctor that you could be. Stay curious. The day you stop being a student is the day you start becoming dangerous. Much of the medicine that I practice today is completely different to the day I qualified. And much of the medicine that you will practice in 20 years doesn't exist today. So a good doctor never stops learning. In my first house job in London with Professor Sir Stanley Peard, he said to us at the beginning, half of what you have been taught is probably wrong. And unfortunately, we don't know which half. Now, it wasn't the most inspiring start, But what it did is it reminded us all that we weren't finished. We were there to continue learning. So be curious, stay humble, and above all, stay human. Treat the numbers, yes, but never lose sight of the person behind them. Know that uncertainty is not a gap in your training. It's the terrain in which we work. And remember that sometimes the most clinical thing you can do is simply sit down, look at someone in the eye, and listen. So you will take an oath today, an important oath that will define your life and will define your career. I hope for all of you, like I've had, it's a great life, a worthy life, and a successful career. So go live it. Congratulations.